Chapter 1. A Storm in the Shadows. The dim light from the chandelier barely illuminated the grand hall of the estate. Smoke swirled in the air, mingling with murmured conversations and the clinking of crystal glasses. Every influential figure in the underworld was present, their sharp gazes and veiled threats a language of their own. Yet all the tension seemed to point to one man, Cale Ariston, the Mafia king. He was an imposing figure, tall and sharply dressed in a tailored black suit. His every movement exuded power, every glance silenced the bravest of men. This was his domain, the very heart of the underworld, and every soul in that room knew it. But Cale's focus wasn't on the crowd tonight. It was on the man standing at the far end of the room, Riker Vale. Dressed in dark leather with a casual elegance, Riker radiated danger and allure. His green eyes held a sharp defiance that could cut through steel, and his lips curved into a faint smirk as if daring anyone to approach him. Though smaller in stature compared to Cale, he was no less formidable. Riker was the Mafia boss who had risen through sheer brilliance and ruthlessness, and he ruled his region with an iron grip. For weeks, whispers of Riker's organization intercepting one of Cale's most lucrative arms deals had been spreading. Cale didn't tolerate disobedience, let alone outright theft, but something about Riker intrigued him. It wasn't just the defiance, it was the sheer audacity of it. As Cale approached, the room seemed to hold its breath. Riker turned to face him, his smirk widening. "Cale Ariston," Riker said, his voice smooth and mocking. "I was beginning to think you'd never bother with a small-timer like me." Cale's lips twitched into a faint smile. "You're not as small as you'd like me to believe, Riker Vale, but you know that already, don't you?" Riker shrugged. "What can I say? Business is booming." Cale's piercing blue eyes locked onto Riker's. "You intercepted my shipment. That's not just business, it's a declaration of war." Riker stepped closer, his smirk never faltering. "Maybe I wanted to see if the so-called Mafia king would come down from his throne." Cale chuckled, a low, dangerous sound. "And now that I'm here?" Riker leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Now I know you bleed just like the rest of us." The tension crackled like electricity between them. Cale admired Riker's nerve, but he also felt the slow burn of obsession taking root. This wasn't just about business or power anymore. Riker had become something more. A challenge, a puzzle, a fire that Cale couldn't ignore. But Riker, too, felt the pull, though he would never admit it. Cale's presence was suffocating, intoxicating, and maddening all at once. The room buzzed back to life as the two men stepped away from each other, their confrontation leaving an unspoken promise hanging in the air. This was only the beginning. As Riker exited the hall, Cale's gaze followed him, his mind already calculating his next move. Riker Vale wasn't just a rival. He was a storm that Cale intended to conquer, even if it meant tearing the underworld apart to do so. Chapter 2. The Dance of Power. The morning after their first confrontation, Riker sat in his private office, reviewing a report from one of his lieutenants. The details were troubling. Several of his trusted allies had gone silent overnight, their loyalties suddenly subside. Cale Ariston's name was scrawled in the margins of the report, underlined twice. Riker leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. He knew Cale's tactics. The Mafia king didn't just strike with brute force. He infiltrated, manipulated, and dismantled organizations from the inside. "Is this how you want to play it?" Riker muttered under his breath. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "Fine, let's see who breaks first." Meanwhile, Cale stood in his penthouse suite, gazing out at the sprawling city below. His mind was consumed with thoughts of Riker Vale. The younger man's defiance lingered, like a challenge he couldn't resist. "Status report," Cale ordered without turning. One of his subordinates stepped forward. "We've secured 3 of Riker's lieutenants. They're feeding us intel on his movements. His operations in the east are already destabilizing." Cale nodded. "Good, keep the pressure on. But don't push him too far. I don't want him destroyed. I want him desperate." The subordinate hesitated. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" Cale glanced over his shoulder, his icy blue eyes narrowing. "Speak." "With all due respect, why not eliminate him? He's a threat to your empire." Cale smirked faintly. "Riker isn't just a threat. He's an opportunity. I'm not interested in erasing him. I'm interested in owning him." That evening, Riker's men intercepted a convoy carrying Kale's shipments. It was a bold move, meant to send a message. Riker himself appeared at the scene, watching as his team dismantled the operation with surgical precision. "Send this back to your boss," Riker said to the trembling courier who had survived. He leaned close, his voice laced with venom. "Tell Kyle Ariston he's not the only one who can play games." The courier nodded frantically before speeding off into the night. Riker lit a cigarette, the flickering flame illuminating his sharp features. He exhaled a plume of smoke, his thoughts drifting to the man who had disrupted his world. Kale wasn't just another rival. He was an enigma. Dangerous, calculating, and infuriatingly persistent. "I won't bow to you, Kale," Riker murmured to himself. "Not now, not ever." Hours later, Riker returned to his penthouse, only to find an envelope waiting for him on his desk. He frowned, picking it up cautiously. The seal was unbroken, marked with Kale's personal insignia. Inside was a single note. "Let's talk. Neutral ground. Midnight. You know where." Riker's jaw tightened as he crumpled the note in his fist. The audacity of Kale's invitation was almost laughable, but Riker couldn't deny the curiosity tugging at him. When midnight came, Riker found himself stepping into a dimly lit lounge on the edge of the city. Kale was already there, seated at a private booth, with a glass of whiskey in hand. "You came," Kale said, his tone calm, but laced with satisfaction. Riker slid into the seat opposite him, his green eyes sharp. "What do you want, Kale?" Kale leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You." Riker's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second before he regained his composure. "You think you can buy me? Threaten me? Break me?" Kale's lips curved into a dangerous smile. "I don't need to break you, Riker. I just need you to see reason. Together, we could rule the entire underworld. Alone, you'll burn yourself out." Riker's laugh was low and mocking. "You really think I'd share power with you?" Kale's gaze darkened, and for the first time his mask of calm slipped. "I don't want your power. I want you." The tension between them was suffocating, the air thick with unspoken challenges and undeniable attraction. Riker leaned back, his smirk returning. "You're playing a dangerous game, Kale." Kale's voice dropped to a near growl. "So are you, Riker. And I always win." Chapter 3. Obsession Unleashed. The days following their midnight meeting were a blur of calculated chaos. Kale's obsession with Riker began to unravel the delicate balance he'd built as the Mafia king. It wasn't just about power anymore. It was about control over Riker. From his towering penthouse, Kale watched the city he ruled. Every street, every deal, every rival, all were part of the empire he had built with blood and strategy. Yet none of it satisfied him. "Have we tightened surveillance on Riker?" Kale asked, his tone sharp. One of his top lieutenants nodded. "Yes, sir. We have eyes on his operations, his meetings, and his inner circle." Kale swirled the whiskey in his glass, staring into its amber depths. "Good. I want to know everything. Every move he makes, every word he speaks." The lieutenant hesitated. "Permission to speak freely?" Kale's gaze flicked up, cold and unyielding. "You're stalling. Speak." "With all due respect, sir, your focus on Riker, it's unusual. Some of the men are beginning to question your priorities." Kale's smile was razor sharp. "Let them question. Riker isn't just another rival. He's the only one who's ever dared to defy me. That makes him mine." Riker, on the other hand, was dealing with his own turmoil. Kale's shadow loomed over every aspect of his life. Trusted allies turned out to be spies. Key shipments mysteriously disappeared. The tension in his organization was palpable, yet Riker refused to let it show. In his office, he leaned over a map spread across his desk, plotting his next move. "Kale thinks he can corner me," he muttered, his green eyes glinting with determination. "But I'm not so easy to cage." One of his lieutenants entered, a grim expression on his face. "Boss, we've confirmed it. Kale's men are infiltrating our northern operations." Riker's jaw tightened. "Pull back the resources there. Let him think he's winning. We'll hit him where it hurts later." The lieutenant nodded and left. Alone, Riker sank into his chair, his mind racing. He hated how Kale had wormed his way into his thoughts, how his presence seemed to linger even when he wasn't there. And yet part of him felt something else, something he didn't want to name. That night, Riker decided to confront Kale's obsession head-on. He orchestrated a trap, one Kale couldn't resist. Using false intel, Riker leaked the location of a supposed high-value shipment. As expected, Kale took the bait. Riker waited in the shadows of the warehouse, his gun in hand, as Kale's men stormed in. Within minutes, the space was cleared, and Kale stepped inside, his presence commanding. "You've made it too easy this time, Riker," Kale said, his voice echoing in the empty space. Riker emerged from the shadows, his gun trained on Kale. "Or maybe you've gotten sloppy." Kale turned slowly, his piercing blue eyes locking onto Riker's. Despite the weapon pointed at him, he smiled. "I knew you'd be here." Riker narrowed his eyes. "And yet you walked right into my trap. What's your game, Kale?" Kale took a step closer, ignoring the gun. "No game, Riker. I came here for you." Riker's finger tightened on the trigger, but he didn't fire. "You're insane." Kale's smile widened. "Insane enough to tear apart the entire underworld for you." For a moment, Riker faltered. The intensity in Kale's eyes was unnerving, suffocating, and yet thrilling. "Why me?" Riker demanded, his voice softer now. Kale stepped even closer, until the gun was pressed against his chest. "Because you're the only one who doesn't fear me. The only one who can match me." Riker's breath hitched, and he hated himself for the way his heart raced. He pushed Kale back roughly. "Stay out of my way or I'll end this myself." Kale's chuckle was low and dark. "You won't, because you feel it too, don't you?" Riker glared at him, but he couldn't deny the truth Kale had spoken. Without another word, he disappeared into the night, leaving Kale standing alone in the warehouse, victorious in a way only he could understand. Chapter 4. Manipulation and Surrender. The days following their tense encounter in the warehouse were marked by a subtle but relentless shift in the balance of power. Kale's manipulations deepened, his reach spreading like shadows into every corner of Riker's world. Riker sat in his office, the tension in the room thick as his lieutenants reported the latest blows to his operations. "Boss, our Northern Arms deal fell through." The supplier pulled out, claiming Kale offered double the price. "And the shipments from the docks?" Riker asked, his tone calm but icy. "Intercepted. We suspect someone inside leaked the route." Riker's jaw tightened. He dismissed the lieutenants with a wave, leaving himself alone with his thoughts. The weight of Kale's constant presence bore down on him. And yet, beneath the frustration, there was something else. "Kale Ariston," he muttered, his fingers drumming on the desk, "you're pushing me into a corner. But you don't realize what happens when I'm cornered." Despite his resolve, Riker couldn't ignore the way Kale consumed his thoughts. It wasn't just anger or rivalry. It was something deeper, something he refused to name. Kale, meanwhile, was savoring the slow unraveling of Riker's defenses. Seated in his lavish study, he reviewed the latest intelligence reports on Riker's operations. "Riker's crew is stretched thin," his chief reported. "His lieutenants are questioning his leadership. If we keep pressing, his organization will collapse." Kale shook his head, a smirk playing on his lips. "That's not the goal. I don't want him broken. I want him desperate enough to come to me." The lieutenant hesitated. "With respect, sir, why not just finish him off?" "He's dangerous." Kale's gaze hardened. "Because I don't destroy what belongs to me." The lieutenant bowed and left the room, leaving Kale alone with his thoughts. He swirled the glass of whiskey in his hand, the amber liquid catching the light. Riker's defiance only fueled his obsession. He wanted to see that fire burn brighter, but only for him. The breaking point came one rainy evening when Riker's last stronghold was ambushed. His men fought valiantly, but Kale's forces overwhelmed them with brutal efficiency. Riker barely escaped, retreating to one of his safe houses, bloodied and exhausted. As he cleaned his wounds, the sound of a door creaking open made him freeze. His gun was in his hand in an instant, aimed at the intruder. Kale stepped into the dimly lit room, his suit immaculate despite the storm outside. "How did you find me?" Riker snarled, his voice low and venomous. Kale closed the door behind him, his expression unreadable. "You're predictable when you're desperate." Riker's grip on the gun tightened. "Get out." Kale took a step closer, ignoring the weapon aimed at him. "No, Riker. You and I both know this ends here." Riker's green eyes burned with fury. "You think you've won?" Kale's voice softened, a dangerous edge beneath the calm. This isn't about winning. It's about you. Stop fighting me, Riker. You've already lost everything but your pride. Let it go. Riker's finger hovered over the trigger, but he couldn't bring himself to pull it. Kale's presence was suffocating, his words cutting deeper than any wound. I hate you, Riker whispered, his voice shaking with anger and something else, something raw and vulnerable. Kale's gaze softened, and for a moment, the ruthless Mafia king seemed almost human. No, you don't. You hate how much you need me. The gun slipped from Riker's hand, clattering to the floor. Kale closed the distance between them, his hand reaching out to cup Riker's face. You're mine, Riker, Kale murmured, his thumb brushing over Riker's cheek. You've always been mine. Riker's breath hitched, his resolve crumbling. He hated Kale's control, his obsession, but he couldn't deny the pull between them. With a shuddering exhale, Riker closed his eyes, surrendering for the first time in his life. Kale's smirk returned, triumphant yet tender. Good, now let's build something unstoppable together. Chapter 5, Bound by Desire. Riker had never felt like this before, an overwhelming ache deep in his chest, a craving he couldn't name or satisfy. It wasn't just the weight of his losses or the slow, smothering grip of Kale's dominance over his world. It was something deeper, primal, and utterly maddening. Kale had been by his side ever since that stormy night when Riker had finally surrendered. It wasn't a traditional truce, but rather a merging of forces. Riker's men now worked under Kale's orders, though Kale made it clear that Riker was not just another subordinate. You're special, Riker, Kale would say, his voice a velvet caress. You're mine. And Riker hated how those words made his pulse race. Late one evening, Riker sat in Kale's penthouse, nursing a glass of whiskey. The room was luxurious, every detail a testament to Kale's power and wealth. Yet Riker felt trapped, tethered by invisible chains. Kale entered the room, his sharp suit replaced with something more casual, black slacks and a crisp shirt, unbuttoned at the collar. The sight of him sent a strange heat coursing through Riker's veins, though he pushed the feeling aside. You've been quiet, Kale remarked, pouring himself a drink and settling beside Riker on the leather sofa. Riker took a slow sip of his whiskey, avoiding Kale's gaze. Just thinking. Kale leaned closer, his voice soft but commanding. About me. Riker scowled, but his body betrayed him, leaning ever so slightly toward Kale's warmth. Don't flatter yourself. Kale chuckled, a low, seductive sound that sent a shiver down Riker's spine. You can deny it all you want, but your body knows the truth. Riker set his glass down with a little more force than necessary. What the hell are you talking about? Kale's hand brushed against Riker's jaw, tilting his face toward him. You've been feeling it, haven't you? That craving, that need. You don't know what it is, but you can't escape it. Riker froze, his breath hitching. What did you do to me? Kale's smirk was equal parts cruel and tender. I've made sure you'll never leave me. Riker's eyes widened, and he pulled away, his heart racing. You! What have you done? Kale's voice remained calm, his gaze steady. My pheromones. You've been exposed to them for weeks now. They've worked their way into your system, binding you to me in ways you can't fight. You don't even realize how much you've come to need me. Riker stood abruptly, his fists clenched. You manipulated me. You... Kale stood too, closing the distance between them in an instant. Yes, I did, and I don't regret it. You're mine, Riker. You've always been mine. Riker's anger faltered, replaced by a wave of dizzying longing. The pull was undeniable, irresistible. Kale's touch, his scent, it consumed him. You had no right, Riker whispered, his voice trembling. Kale cupped Riker's face, his thumb tracing the edge of his jaw. I had every right, because I'm the only one who can protect you. The only one who can match you. You belong to me, Riker. Body, mind, and soul. Riker's knees felt weak, his resistance crumbling under the weight of Kale's presence. He hated how much he wanted this, how much he wanted him. You're a bastard, Riker muttered, his voice cracking. Kale chuckled, leaning in to press his forehead against Riker's. But I'm your bastard. Riker's lips parted, and before he could think, Kale's mouth was on his, claiming him with a possessive intensity. The kiss was a battle, a surrender, and a promise all at once. When they finally broke apart, Riker's breath was ragged, his resolve shattered. "You've won," he admitted, his voice barely audible. Kale's arms tightened around him, his expression softening for the first time. "It's not about winning, Riker. It's about keeping you. Forever." Riker rested his head against Kale's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Despite the manipulation, despite the obsession, he couldn't deny the comfort he felt in Kale's embrace. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't want to. In the days that followed, Riker found himself adjusting to his new reality. Kale's obsession didn't feel suffocating anymore. It felt like a strange, twisted kind of love. And as much as Riker hated to admit it, he couldn't imagine life without Kale. Because now Kale wasn't just the Mafia king. He was Riker's king, and Riker was his willing captive.